Jeffrey Mitchell from the University of Maryland, who is sort of the father of modern CISD, came out and did some training, and we went to it together and got the information, and there really wasn't a CISD team in the Bay Area. There was some trauma intervention people and that who had been doing a good job, but there was really no CISD. And so we just got together, a group of us, and decided to use the center as our patron, as it were, and sort of put the team together and try to draw from all the disciplines. We want to get police officers and dispatchers and nurses and everybody who this really touched. And it just sort of grew, but it was not an easy process, right?
That's right.
Long process.
It was a long process, and what Bob is saying is true, because not only do we have to deal with getting line personnel to accept this concept of critical incident stress management, but also administration and people who had been used to, in the emergency services field, I think very much, dealing with, you just, shove it in, pull it in, deal with it, move on. So it's kind of educating that actually they'll have happier, better employees if they do it this way and respond in a
less burnout, I imagine. Let's take a look at the second grouping of feelings we might have. Let's say we come through denial. Well, we might have what Michael Mantell calls a cataclysm of emotions: anger, rage, fear, terror, frustration, if I had only, confusion, guilt or self-blame, perhaps the survivor guilt, grief or sorrow. You mentioned before that people might have a lot of different feelings as a result.
Right. And what happens often in that is that we can switch from being angry and furious and directing that outward to immediately moving it inward. If only I had done this, if only I had operated in this way, if only I had been there, maybe I would have been the one that would have received the bullet, or whatever the issue is. So you've got a lot of if-onlys in that survivor's guilt. And sometimes in working in the aftermath, I find that people that witness the incident are many times as traumatized as the people working the incident because of that sense of helplessness. I couldn't be there in the middle helping.
And I would imagine for trained helpers, like you're talking about, that must be twice as difficult.
Exactly.
They're used to having control. They're used to being able to get in there where the rest of us are afraid to go. And so for them, having the experience of having to say, I couldn't do anything, must be so hard.
Yeah, the two that we deal with most are the anger and the what if. Those are the two we see most, for the very reasons that you just elaborated.
Okay.
The frustration and not being able to be successful.
Yeah. It's hard when you have the tools and you're unable to implement them.
That's
I
right.
would well imagine.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take a look at the next grouping. And then we'll come back to, I know, a process that you have. Stage 3, reconstruction or equilibrium, regaining emotional and mental balance and a new outlook about what happened and a plan for coping. And my understanding of that is a sense of, okay, getting a sense of what this incident might have meant on a personal level, on a larger level. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. I think where it ties to your past experiences or what triggered it for you as an individual.
And I think, too, what happens is that once we can get an understanding that it taps into these maybe previously unthought of issues, we can kind of put a larger context to it and understand, okay, even though these overwhelming feelings are occurring, we can have some control over how we deal with them and how we handle them. And that's the value of the group getting together. And in fact, why the debriefing process works. It's a little bit different than traditional psychotherapy or counseling techniques, and that's why it's a very important process, is that it includes everyone and gives everyone a chance to actually positively support each other. And it's very positive in its orientation, and it's not only a chance for people to have a ventilation component where they can ventilate their feelings, but also education, where they can learn how to deal with it and to have some positive ways of coping when they walk out of that debriefing.
Now, you mentioned a process. Can you tell us about that?
There's actually a 3-step process that happens in the aftermath of an incident. Bob alluded to a couple of those. In the immediate aftermath, you have what's called demobilization, and that is what you do immediately on scene or immediately after the incident to provide immediate support. And basically what that is staying out of the way of the operations of the incident and being there as people are coming off, the incident scene, to be able to provide them with some choices about what they need, finding out how you can best support them. It might be getting them a glass of water, it might helping them make a phone call home to family, it might be mobilizing them to a safe and neutral area. Again, the important thing is not to ask them deep psychological questions, but more to get them in a sense of feeling safe and feeling comfortable and feeling normal and feeling like they're going to be taken care of in the aftermath. Then you have diffusing. Now the diffusing process happens between 0 and 24 hours after the incident, and again it's a very informal gathering of the people involved with the incident. And usually this is done with peer counselors, peer people that are trained, that are also emergency responders, that can get their group together and just be able to talk basically about what happened out there and what feelings and reactions are coming in the aftermath. Let's just talk about it, understand we're normal, just do some really quick tips on how to handle stress, how to make it going home, and basically that's it. All of these procedures, whether you're doing demobilization, diffusing, or debriefing, there are some ground rules that have to be followed. One is confidentiality. Everything that is shared stays there with that. No notes or paperwork. So no one's taking notes, not your psychologist, not your mental health professional, not your peer counselors, no one. No attendance is taken. So there's no record of what happened. In fact, the way our team operates is we just have a form that says we were mobilized on such and such a date by such and such a department. We responded with such and such members of the team, and that's it.
Okay, so but let me interrupt a moment. You had mentioned that it's mandatory for your people.
It is mandatory, and in that sense, if you wanted to find out who was there, I suppose you could, because you know who was on what engine company and what truck company for the day. But we do not submit a roster.
Okay.
The fire chief does not get a report. The city manager does not get a report. It's a very generic form, said on this date, these companies were pulled out of service, we had a debriefing, the end. Okay. And that's really all it is. If there is even the slightest violation of the safe haven or the confidentiality, you'll never be effective again.
Okay.
That's really critical.
I can imagine it is.
Because they are opening up.
Exactly.
And some of them, I would guess, have never really opened up before. They may not have ever even talked to their families.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's true.
There's
So
a
it must be
mutual
pretty
protection
scary.
that happens, a kind of a conspiracy of silence where I won't tell you about what I went through and you don't tell me, and so we'll kind of protect each other.
That's also one of the reasons that we separate the groups. If we've had a multi-agency incident that involves, say, police and maybe private ambulance company and dispatchers and firefighters, we will debrief them individually by groups, because within their job scope they have different concerns, different needs. Even though there's a common thread, a common link, they still view things differently.
That's right.
And to blend police officers with firefighters and then really open up is not really productive. Okay,
so the defusing you would do with everyone who participated. The debriefing you separate out.
You could. We usually separate the defusings too.
Okay. So how many people are on a team then when you go out?
Well, it depends on how many people are being diffused or debriefed. You don't want to have more members of your team than you do have people being debriefed, which is something you have to watch out for. But usually it's a mental health professional or a person who's the facilitator of the debriefing. Then you have two peers, for a larger debriefing. You might only have one peer counselor if you've got a smaller group that are being debriefed.
Very frequently we've done debriefings with 1 or 2 people.
Right.
Sometimes 3. Janet and I have often gone out, just the 2 of us.
Yeah.
I had one just recently in our department where Janet handled it alone. Because of the incident, we agreed to that it was better that outside people come in rather than do it internally.
Right.
Okay. How do you decide which incidents you're going to do a debriefing and which incidents you will not be?
There are some very clear definitions of a critical incident, and the bottom line, our team's definition of a critical incident is any incident that causes unusually strong reactions in the responding personnel.
We have a laundry list of some incidents that we use as key.
Exactly.
And we always have a debriefing if those occur. Any death or serious trauma involving a child, murder, anything involving a member of the department, death or serious injury. And there are several of those. Beyond that, the criteria, though, is we use is what Janet said, is anything that evokes a serious emotional reaction. And it might be a nothing incident.
Exactly.
It might be a nothing thing.
But as you mentioned, it touches something in our personal history
That's right.
that
Exactly.
makes it something for the particular people involved.
We had one incident when this one particular engine company was very busy and had gone to several calls, and they responded to another vehicle accident. They were canceled as they arrived on the scene. They never even got off their engine. But what they saw when they arrived there was a firefighter from another company carrying a child over the ambulance. And we wound up debriefing that company, even though they hadn't even stepped off the engine.
Okay.
So it really depends on the emotional impact.
Okay. Now, I had mentioned before families. I mean, what happens for the families of the different personnel you're talking about? Are they ever included in this process?
Many times they can be, but usually it's a separate type of debriefing that is done for them as well, so that they have a chance to talk about. Many times after a debriefing, people will ask us to talk to their families about what can I do, you know, have them tell them what they can do to help me. Because a lot of times families are well-meaning, but they don't know what to say or what to do.
Well, and having not experienced that, I mean, the best you could do is use your imagination and say, you know, I would think that would be awful, but that's real different than having the impact of it personally.
So I think any way we can bring the families in to educate them as well is very useful. And also to let people know that, you know, as a family member, what you can give is your love and support. But, you know, you're not, again, going to be able to make it better. Going back to what Bob said, you know, there's no real fix-it cure for this. We are going to be impacted by the incident, but by gently and easily acknowledging it and dealing with it, you are going to create a better and more positive atmosphere to deal with it. So opening them up and letting them know you're going to have, you know, maybe a person coming home from work that's not going to be in a good mood, that maybe is going to be short or maybe be irritable, maybe not going to be able to deal with the activities of daily living, you know, because they're going to be, you know, maybe dealing with the impact of the incident. So it's going to be, they may have, we worked with one situation, Bob and I went out on a debriefing where this one young officer had worked on a juvenile's death, and he basically, a young highway patrolman that had a child the same age, and when he came home he had a hard time hugging his own child because it just brought back the incident. So again, making his wife aware of that, that's why he couldn't hold their baby, helped her to understand some of his reactions.
And didn't cause her to maybe interpret that as a family problem.
Exactly.
We're going to need to close. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your time with us. Thank you for being here. Join us next week as we challenge stereotypes of mental illness. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.